And welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here on the west coast of Canada. I hope everybody is having a great weekend thus far, staying healthy and staying strong. Hi Carolina, welcome to our chat moderator. Welcome Janelle. This is a members chat class and we're focusing on some questions and answers, hoping to clarify different points about the IELTS and the English language to get those high band scores, potentially even a band 9. While we wait for a few more members, this lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS success. Check us out there. For the general IELTS, visit us at IELTShelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com. On both of those websites, we have lots and lots of materials to help you with your exam and also to answer your questions. Hi, Nick Hill. This class is definitely going to be valuable for anyone to watch. If you'd like to become a member of our channel, you can simply click the join button next to the subscribe button on our channel. To become a member of our websites, you can click this big red button here at glshelp.com. It's a one-time payment for lifetime access. And if you'd like to join our academic IELTS website, then at aehelp.com you can click this big red button to join us there. We are an official British Council IELTS registration center and certified agents, so you're in good hands with us. Mahmoud Al-Rahal, welcome to our group of members. Good morning, June. Good of you, Mahmoud, to join us. Send me an email, Mahmoud, to hook you up with your perks. I'll show you where you can do that, Mahmoud. So you can send emails and questions to Adrian at aehelp.com. Also, if anybody doesn't have our apps yet, download the app Academic IELTS Help. You can access a lot of our videos through the app as well and our materials, and it links to our website. And General IELTS Help app links to glshelp.com. Okay, Abin, welcome to our group of members. Good to have you on board. So for this week, today, we still have this question and answer session right now, and then we'll have a speaking part 2 for everyone. In our usual schedule, we'll have no class from the 20th to the 22nd, and then again, we will have live classes starting from the 23rd, so a full week, and this schedule will be up on our YouTube community board, so you can check it out there. Okay, so we're going to do a question and answer session for our students, for our members. It's going to be a first come, first serve kind of setup, and that means whoever puts in their question first, members, I'll try to answer that first, and then second after that. If the questions are related, I'll try to explain them together. Okay. All right. Janelle, thank you for sharing your experience. Janelle's just writing his exam, and Janelle writes, I feel the rush in the writing section. I have known a lot of good concepts and vocabulary for writing essays, but in this exam, I couldn't come up with anything good. How to solve this problem? Stay calm, Janelle. Keep focused, and remember that the questions in the IELTS are meant to be or are designed in such a way that they can be answered by a broad range of people. So it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter if you're young or old, if you're from India or China. The questions should be related to just about anybody, anywhere in the world. So keep that open kind of concept. Think outside the box, Janelle. Okay? All right. So, June, I see your question. Before we get into questions today, everyone, I want to go over conditionals a little bit. One of the questions that was asked last time we did this Q&A session was by Rajveer. And I know it's a common one for students. And I don't see Rajveer here yet, but I promised him that I would talk about this a little bit. So the question was, could you explain conditionals a bit? Okay. And I want to do that because I think that there's a lot of information on conditionals when students are learning that's really confusing. And I have an idea of why that is, but anyway, it's really confusing. And conditionals are a very common part of language. So I'm going to talk a little bit about conditionals to discuss this topic in a bit of detail here. So just give me a moment, and then I will look at other questions as well. Okay. And Janil says, yes, first conditionals. Okay. So Rajveer's question was, could you explain about conditionals a bit? Suggestion. And yes, I can. Okay. So I will explain this to you clearly because I think language is quite subjective, and teaching language can be quite tricky because it's so subjective. It's a little bit, so it's not like, well, that's not quite true either, like math. Math seems a little bit more objective. So 1 + 1 is 2. And math is objective until you get into a very high level of math. And then you realize that math is also subjective, and 1 + 1 is not always 2. Language is the same, but a little bit earlier on. So language right away from the beginning seems very subjective, and the teaching of language, therefore, is sometimes very confusing. And I want to kind of clarify that a little bit, and conditionals are a prime example of this. So condition would be like, if I had $1 million, I would buy a house. And that's true. That's about what a house costs in Victoria right now where I live. Or I could also write, when I have $1 million, I buy a house. Okay. So these would be conditionals. All right. Now, conditionals, it means there's a condition, so there's a situation, and depending on that situation, there's an outcome or a result or a desired outcome. Okay. So I'm going to watch the chat carefully here, students. Oh, there's Rajveer. Good Rajveer here in the class. We're talking about conditionals. And I'm going to explain this to you as clearly as possible so that I can kind of demystify conditionals for you. Okay. All right, so first thing that you need to know is a conditional is a complex sentence which is a subordinating conjunction, which is using a subordinating conjunction. Now, this might seem a little bit confusing at first, but bear with me and it'll make a lot of sense. Okay. Conjunction with an N. There. Okay, so first of all, to understand conditionals and the grammar of conditionals, you need to understand the way that subordinating conjunctions work. Okay, so subordinating conjunctions have a main clause, also called an independent clause. Okay, so I would buy a house if I had $1 million. Okay, so notice how I've written this sentence twice. If I had $1 million, comma, I would buy a house. Okay, and here I would buy a house if I had $1 million. It's the same sentence, but where you see the comma, I've reversed it. So I've taken this part and I've moved it to the beginning of the sentence, okay? That's because a subordinating conjunction has two parts. Okay, it has what's called the main clause, and it has what's called the dependent clause. Okay, now just to make life a bit more challenging for people learning English, some grammar rules or structures have different ways to call them. So a main clause is also referred to in your textbooks as an independent clause. Okay, and the dependent clause is also referred to as the subordinate clause. Okay, so generally speaking, these are referred to as subordinate sentences or complex sentences. Okay, and the dependent clause, or AKA the subordinate clause, is called this because it depends on the main clause. So the main clause does not depend on the subordinate clause. Let me make that clear for you. So the main clause is a sentence by itself. It's grammatically correct. So I could write a sentence, I would buy a house. Okay, this is a full sentence in English because it has the subject, it has the verb, and it has the noun. So you have subject, verb, object. Okay, subject, verb, object. That's a complete sentence. That sentence can stand on its own. But the sentence, if I had $1 million, notice how it is not a standalone sentence. So this sentence by itself is considered an incomplete sentence. So this incomplete sentence is called a dependent or subordinate clause. Now, you can write it with the dependent clause first and then the independent clause. There you need this very important comma in this case. Okay? Or in conditionals, you can also use the word then instead of the comma in most cases. Okay? Is everybody following me so far on understanding the basic grammar structure of the conditional as a complex sentence, as a subordinating clause joined with a main clause or an independent clause? Is everybody kind of, I hope I'm not losing anybody, because the next step is explaining your first, second, third conditionals once you've understood this basic grammar part. Okay, so to understand conditionals, it really has to be a step-by-step process. Okay, and importantly, when you're reading your books or you're hearing teachers, if you hear the word main clause or independent clause, it's the same idea. Okay, when you hear dependent clause or subordinate clause, it's the same idea. It's like hearing continuous form, ing, and progressive form, ing. That's the same idea, okay? Progressive and continuous, they're synonyms. They're expressing the same grammar rule of the ing with the verb, okay? In this case, you've got a couple of ways to call these elements, all right? Now, before we go to the next step, an important question is, why? So why in the world would we have this grammar where you could say the dependent clause first or the independent clause? So you can say, if I had $1 million, I would buy a house. Or you could say, I would buy a house if I had $1 million. So why? And I think some of our members know this. So what's the reason, what's the logic, what is the utility or the usefulness of being able to switch the dependent and independent clause order? So what's the use of being able to say, if I had $1 million, ... or I would buy a house, ... What's the use of that? Okay, so Rajveer and Nick, he'll say emphasis, and you're absolutely correct. I've taught about this in the past. So In this case, it's called priming for humans, or the primary effect. The primary effect for humans is basically when we hear a concept first, that's what we focus on. Okay, so it's the power of the first. Okay, so here it's the if I had $1 million. So here in this sentence, the emphasis is here. The strength of the message is here. And it's kind of saying like, I'm wishing for $1 million. Okay, so that's where the emphasis is. All right. Because it's the first part of my sentence. It's the first point. It's the first concept that's heard by my audience. All right. Here, I'm wishing for a house. Okay. Because here, the first concept is the buying the house. So this is really the idea, the mastery of communication at the highest level. And this is where we're talking about Band 8, Band 9 IELTS. So Band 9 IELTS, you're not only speaking English, and this is where it really doesn't matter if you're native or non-native speaker. So at Band 9, you're an expert user of the English language. It doesn't matter if you're native or non-native. It matters that you can use communication and English at the highest level, or I should say English for communication, at the highest level, whereby you can control the emphasis of your ideas. And this is a good example of that in your writing or in your speaking. So here, I'm emphasizing my wish for $1 million, in which case I would buy a house. Here, I'm emphasizing my wish for a house provided the fact that I had $1 million. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, this is not only true for conditionals, but it's also true for your other types of complex sentences with subordinate conjunctions, such as cause and effect, time, and opposition. Okay, those are your other categories that I'm not going to talk about now, because then we'd be talking about that for the next week. Okay, so is everybody clear on this concept of the emphasis, the importance of emphasis? Yeah? Okay, brighten us up a little bit there. Okay, all right, there we go. All right, so it looks like we've got some yeses. We've got a thumbs up from Carolina. That's great. All right, so now we've kind of understood the basic concept of conditionals, okay? And here I've written another example. So when I have $1 million, I buy a house, okay? So the difference between the if I had $1 million, I would buy a house, or when I have $1 million, I would buy a house. The difference is unreal versus real. Okay? So if I use this first sentence, if I had $1 million, I would buy a house. It's unreal. It's wishful thinking. Okay? So here, I'm telling my listener that I don't actually have this $1 million. I'm just dreaming about it. And if this dream were to ever become reality, it means I would buy a house. It's wishful thinking, but importantly, it also shows lack of confidence. Okay? Here, when I have $1 million, I buy a house. This is real. It means I actually potentially have this $1 million, or I earn enough money. I have a very good business, or I have an extremely good job. I'm a surgeon maybe, and I do actually have the capacity to earn $1 million. And when I earn that $1 million, then in that situation, I buy a house. That's what I actually do. So it's a real condition, and it shows strong confidence. Okay, let's call it strong confidence. Now, again, when you're an expert communicator in English, then this matters a lot. Okay? And I'll give you an example of that. I've maybe given it before in the past. So it matters a lot to control the real and the unreal condition. And the real and the unreal condition is what is referred to as the first and second condition. Now, I'm going to kind of throw that idea into the garbage, the first, second, third condition, and I'll explain that in a moment why and what is a better way to think about conditionals, okay? But before we get there, let's look at this for a moment. So here we have unreal, we have real. And on purpose, I used, notice, different subordinate conjunctions. So in the first one I used if, in the second one I used when. When is only and exclusively used for real conditions. When cannot be used for an unreal condition. So when you're practicing your communication and your writing, your speaking, really focus on using when in real conditions, because for a listener, an audience, especially for a native speaker, as soon as they hear a when condition, they immediately, even without knowing, understand that you're talking about a real condition. Okay? If is the most commonly used subordinate conjunction for conditions, and if is used for unreal or real condition. So when you're using if, the listener doesn't actually know whether it's a real or unreal condition until they hear or read the other parts of the sentence. But when you use when, the listener immediately knows that it's a real condition without even hearing the remaining parts of the sentence. Okay? Is that clear? That's a very important point in your communication. Okay? Is that clear, everybody? That's a really important point. So I really strongly encourage you to use when using a real condition. And I really encourage you strongly to use if specifically for unreal conditions. And then learn to use the other types of conjunctions like provided that, given that, okay? There are some other type of conditional phrases as well. Provided that I had $1 million, I would buy a house. Those can usually be applied to both of these, all right? Okay, so I've got some yeses. Andre says thumbs up. That's good. All right. Okay, now to shed a little bit of further light into why this is super important to master, because let's say you're in a business meeting, okay? And let's say that I'm a builder, okay? So my company builds houses for sale for people, okay? So let's say that I'm bidding on a contract. So there's a contract to build 100 new homes in a neighborhood. My company is bidding to build this contract, or to fill this contract to build these homes. And of course, I have some competitors who are also bidding on this contract, okay? So a good example of why this kind of communication is really important to master when you're getting into the real world. And especially because English is the language of business, and 95% of all money in the world trades hands using English, believe it or not. If I'm in a business meeting with the investors or contractors, and I have my competitors there, I might say a sentence like, when you choose to build these homes with my company, it will not only cost less, but the homes will also be of the highest quality. Okay? Versus, if you would choose to build these homes with my company, they would not only cost less, but the homes would also be of the highest quality. Okay, so let's say that I'm in this meeting and I have a choice of these two ways to express myself, right? So if I express myself with the real condition, obviously now you should be realizing that this is a real condition. Okay, so it's your first conditional, but again, we're going to get away from that, and this is the unreal condition. This is your second condition here. Again, I'm not going to use that first, second, third condition, and you're going to see why in a moment. Okay, so it matters in the meeting in a big way, the way that I'm using my words and my grammar, because in this first sentence, what's the big difference? So now that I've talked to you a little bit about this, what's the big difference between these two? And why is this one the better sentence to use? And why is this one not a good choice for me as a businessman in this situation where I'm bidding for this contract? So why is A, let's call this A good choice? And why is B a bad choice in my communication to the investors or to the contractors? So why would I want to use this sentence in my presentation or in my meeting or in my email and not the second sentence? What's the big difference? So Abin says A displays confidence in the fact that I will be the one. Yeah. Okay. All right. Carolina, I'm not too sure what you're referring to, but I'll get back to it in a second. Because, yeah, A shows confidence, so I'll explain it to you why. So this shows confidence that the investors will choose me over my competitors. Okay, so the idea here is this shows that they will choose me over my competitors, and this is what will happen. It's not what might happen, but it is what will happen. Okay, so this shows confidence in my position. Absolutely. Okay, and I believe that that is going to be a real situation, that I will be chosen and this will really happen, instead of I might get chosen and it may be an unreal situation. Okay? All right. Okay, so let me take a look here, Carolina. Okay, so versus the unreal condition, if you would choose to build these homes with my company, they would not only cost less, but the homes would also be of the highest quality. So this is the present tense of this form, and this is what's called the third condition here, because it's wishful thinking, Carolina. That's why it's not chose. That's where it gets a little bit confusing. Okay, I'm going to explain that a little bit clearer. So the tenses, Carolina, right now with a nice diagram. Okay, and this diagram, Rajveer, is what we're going to put up on our blogs, on our website as well, or a similar diagram, because this one isn't actually ours. So one of the ways that students learn conditionals is first, second, third condition. And I think that's a very confusing way to learn conditionals. It's not a rational way. There isn't actually a type of logic behind it. A better way to learn conditions is this way. Okay. So I'm going to show you this form here now that we've gotten to this point. And now you'll have a much better understanding of first, second, third condition. So for now, what I want you to do, students, is anything that you've learned with the first, second, third condition, just kind of put it to the side and forget about it for a second, okay? Instead of thinking about conditionals as first, second, third condition, okay, think about it just in a simpler kind of concept of real conditionals and unreal conditionals. Okay, because third conditionals are what's called wishful thinking, but that's kind of an unreal conditional as well. So there's really only first and second conditionals, okay? Or better said, there's really just real conditions and unreal conditions. When the scenario happens and a result or a consequence happens, and when there's only a thought of it happening, it's not real, and the condition is real or unreal. Okay, so let me clarify this. It's going to make a lot more sense once you actually see this. Okay, all right. So the key here is to look at the title. So here we have a present real conditional. Okay, so here's an example of a present real conditional, and again, I will have this graph on our blogs, so you can review it and try some examples later, all right? Angelo, don't worry, it's going to make a lot of sense. So here we have a present real condition. If I have time, I study English, okay? So sometimes I have time, okay? In the present unreal conditional, okay, the verb have, okay, this isn't an auxiliary verb, this is the actual verb here. It moves into the past. Okay, so notice that this becomes the past here. Okay, if I had time, I would study English. And so we add the modal would. Okay, that's the change that happens from present real condition to present unreal condition. Okay, if I have time, I study English. It means sometimes I have time and I actually study English. In the present unreal conditional, okay, the verb moves to the past in the subordinate clause. So if I had time, and then you add the modal would to the verb study. I would study English. It means I don't have time. I have some wishful thinking that maybe I hope I do have some time, but I don't really have time, and this is what I would do. Okay. Sadesh, again, if can be used for both real or unreal. So I could replace this with when. Okay. Now it's very clearly a real condition, but this is why it's a little bit confusing for students, because if can be used for both real and unreal, as I just explained a few minutes ago. So far, so good, everyone. So you have real condition. So again, forget about the whole first condition, second condition, third condition. It's confusing. I think it's irrational, the whole explanation of first, second, third condition. This is a much clearer way to understand this grammar structure. Okay. So, so far so good, everyone. Yeah. So present, this is present tense. If I have time, I study English. Sometimes I have time, and in that time I study English. Present unreal, if I had time, I would study English. I don't have time. This is still present general tense, okay? So, all right, everyone is good so far, yeah? All right. Okay, so let's move to the next example, and I think, Carolina, this will make more sense now, too, of why it was the could. I think it's because you were looking at the main clause, okay? So here, now we have past real condition, okay? And past unreal condition. So we've moved back one in time, okay? So we're moving from present to past, because we really have three timelines, right? We have the present, we have the past, we have the future, okay? And I could tell you some really interesting points about that, but we'll leave that for another time. All right, so here we have the past real condition. Now notice that what happens here is the verb becomes the past, okay? Compared to, of course, the present. And here as well, okay, becomes the past. Okay, so if I had time, I studied English. Let me put that in a bigger sentence for you. So when I was in university, if I had time, I studied English. Okay, so it happened in the past. So sometimes in university, I had time, I studied some more English. Okay, now when we go to the past unreal conditional, look at this. This is what gets really confusing, especially for even for native speakers. I think this gets confusing for a lot of non-native speakers as well. So if I had time, I would have studied English. Okay. So this is a past unreal conditional. All right. This is the simple past. Okay. And this is the past perfect. All right. One kind of weird way that you can think about the past perfect is it's even before the past, right? Because we use the past perfect to take an action in the past and put it behind another action that happened in the past. Okay? We flew to Copenhagen. We had arrived to the airport an hour before our departure. So it means that we actually arrived to the airport an hour before our departure and then flew to Copenhagen. So here it's the past perfect, okay? And because I'm using the past perfect here, the independent clause still takes the modal would, but it also uses the present perfect. For the main clause, okay? So basically, you're moving back in time simply here from the present tense, and here you're moving back twice. Notice how here, let me try to, without deleting that, let's do that. So notice how here the present unreal conditional is back in time, okay? If I had time, I would study English. So here I moved this back in time, my verb, right? Now, because here, in my second one, I'm already in the past, I have to move it into the past past. Does that make sense? So the unreal condition moves 1/10 to the past before the real condition, okay? So that's what you have to keep in mind, okay? And this is why I like this way of explaining this much, much more than thinking about it as the first, second, third condition, okay? All right? Andrea, it's good that your brain is boiling, all right? Yeah, Mahmoud, exactly. So move 1/10 to the past, right? And add, because this is past perfect now, this becomes the present perfect, okay? If you think about the timelines, it makes sense why this is the present perfect, because it's an action that would have started in the past, would have continued until now, and into the future, okay? So here it means sometimes I had time and I studied English, and here it means I didn't have time, but if I had time, I would have studied English at that time in the past, continuously over an unspecified amount of time, hence the present perfect. Okay? All right, and then we've now covered real and unreal in the present, in the past, and now what we have left, of course, is the future. Now, English doesn't actually have future tense. English uses, there are actually very few languages in the world that have what's called a true future tense. English doesn't have a future tense. Again, that's very confusing when students learn this sometimes. English only has will. Many languages are similar, which is a future participle. Okay, it tells the listener or the reader that this is happening in the future, so will or going to. It's not a true future tense because the verb is still in the present tense, right? Okay, so the future real condition, okay. Notice something interesting. If I have time, it's just present again. I will study English. Okay, so here all that happens is the verb would, the modal would, now turns into will. Okay, which is also interesting because would is in essence the past tense of will. It's the past of will. Okay, so here now it's in the future. Okay, now again, keep in mind that would is the past of will. Okay, so it's no surprise that when we move to the future unreal conditional, okay, again, the verb have moves to the past, okay, had, and the future modal will moves to the past would. Okay, so if I had time, I would study English. Now, some of you are going, well, what? That's kind of, isn't this, if I had time, I would study English, the same as if I had time, I would study English as the present? Okay, it is. Okay, so future unreal and present unreal uses basically the same grammar. All right. So we don't actually know whether we're talking about the present or the future until we specify that using more words, right? Like next year, if I had time, I would study English, but I won't because I will be busy with my microbiology studies or whatever. So we specify that future with some kind of a leading expression like next year. Okay, if I had time, I would study English, but I won't because I'm going to be doing scuba diving or something else. Okay, all right, that makes sense because when the condition is unreal, it's unreal currently and it's potentially unreal in the future as well, unless otherwise specified. So here you have to keep logic in mind. Does that make sense, everyone, so far? So here in the future real and future unreal conditional, the key is in understanding that the concept of will and would is present and past. Okay, so again, you're always moving back in time one. If I'm moving back in time from if I have time, I will study English. It becomes if I had time, I would study English. So next year when I'm living in Spain, if I had time, I would study English, but I won't because I will be learning architecture and Renaissance art. So it's just not going to be possible. All right. Okay, so that's it in a 40-minute nutshell for conditionals. Okay, thank you for bearing with me, students, on that. Again, I will post this chart for you with the explanation that I gave you in this class in the blogs. So when you're on the website, students, this is aehelp.com. This is what Rajveer was asking. When you go into your My Student account, and then you have the blogs here at the top. Okay, so go to the blog, and in these blogs, you'll see lots of different topics like IELTS Speaking Part 2 Charity. And here, you're going to see different topics: IELTS Focus, IELTS Information, Learning Materials, reading, scores, strategy, and so on. Vocabulary uncategorized. So you'll be able to do a search up here. I don't think we have anything here yet. So conditional. Yeah, we don't have that yet. But when you're in this blog next week, I'll make sure to add it for this week. We'll have this chart in here, and then we'll have the explanation with some examples. So I highly recommend practicing some writing and some speaking with these conditionals, okay? Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so Amanda says, if I had time, I would not have hurt you. Actually, I have hurt you. Yeah, Amanda, you're right. So you have hurt the person, and the reason why is because you didn't have time. Okay, so you're also telling me that, Amanda. So that is a good example, Amanda. It means you actually hurt the person because you're using the negative. So when you mix negative into an unreal condition, you're creating a double negative, right? Negative unreal will create a positive, Amanda. So if I had time, I would not have hurt you means that in the past you actually hurt me because you didn't have enough time. Okay, so good. So make sure to practice these. They will be up. Okay, Amanda, that was a good practice example. And at the very beginning, June is asking, when doing speaking part 3, should we consider it as a mini writing task too? I mean, try to answer with opinion, explanation, example, conclusion, and use at least 2 points. Great question, June. Yeah, in some sense, you might be over speaking if you think of at least 2 points. Listen to the question, June. If it's asking plural, like what are some reasons for, then yeah, give 2 points. If it's asking singular, like what is the reason for, then 1 point is enough, okay? So you have to really pay attention to the question, June, in speaking part 3. Yeah, you're right. You should think about it kind of as a body paragraph. Yeah, that's a very smart way. Again, just like we talked about now with conditionals, the key to great scores on the IELTS exam and success in life is great communication skills. And that's one of the foundations of good communication, June, when we're conveying a concept, is to answer, explain, and then give an example. And if it's plurals, if it needs multiple points of support, then we give 2, 3 points of support. Okay? So absolutely, that's how you should think about it in part 3. Okay, so students, that's all I'm going to do for this class. I think that's quite a bundle. It's a big bite to chew on. So I'm going to stop there for today. I'm sorry I didn't really get to too many other questions, but this was one that kept coming up in other classes, and Regveer really asked a couple of times to do this. So I will, in this case, put in another Q&A session for next week. Carolina, if I still didn't answer the question clearly with the chart of why it's choose instead of chose, send me an email and we can discuss it in more detail, okay? We can talk about it a little bit more, all right? Deepika, just call me Adrian. Okay, Adrian is fine. All right, everyone. So worry not if you are not a member. We do have one more class coming up. It is speaking part 2. We're going to do a speaking part 2 cue card, long answer, in 30 minutes. And for everybody watching, if you liked this video, you want some HD videos, check us out on our websites at aehelp.com, gieltshelp.com. We got lots more there for you. The websites, again, this is our academic one where I was showing the blog, and this is our general one. Just click that big red button. Check out our premium package. It's well worth it. You're very welcome, Nick Hill. You're welcome, members. Hopefully I'll see you soon in 30 minutes for some speaking part 2 practice. Hey, maybe you can throw some conditionals into your speaking part 2 response. Might not be a bad idea. I'm Adrian. I'm signing out from Victoria for now, but I will see you shortly. Bye.